It is notable in that case that the founding father of the modern Olympics never envisioned the Games to even include women. Through the years, tens of thousands of female athletes have proven that outlook to be wrong. And now, for the first time in Olympic history, there are nearly as many female athletes participating as there are male. And for more on gender parity in sports, let's now bring in Mike Bako, sports editor at thedailynational.com. Mike, thanks so much for joining us. This is really a hot button issue and a lot of people in our newsroom, a lot of buzz about it. So thank you for being here. I'm wondering if you can first just add your own perspective on how women's participation in the Olympics and other world level competition has evolved and how overdue is parity?
And I think that's the real key to point there is how overdue it is. When you think about parity, we'll go back to the most recent Olympic Games, when we think about where this is coming from. So in 1996, Atlanta, 34% of the participants were females. It was around that time that the IOC decided to try to strive for this. They set certain goals. They didn't set any quotas, but what they did do was put in place the sort of mindset that they did want to get to this parity point of 50% as we have here in 2024 in Paris. So what did they do? It was really a ground roots effort in terms of bringing in more coaches, trying to encourage the nations to form more female teams. And one of the biggest things that they did over these last 2.5 decades is to try to make it as equal as possible the number of medal events that are possible for men and females to compete in. Right now for this 2024 Paris Games, it's 157 events for the men and 152 for women. And that is a big increase over these last few decades.
Yeah, 157 to 152, that's quite an achievement. Are there any other sort of programs that you think have made the Olympics sort of stand out and become more inclusive, in your opinion?
Yeah, so one of the things that is few and far between for the IOC is for them to be paid compliments, certainly, but over these last years of corruption and different things that have been going on with the leadership. But the one thing that you can point to is that it has come from the IOC, in particular from the IOC president, Thomas Bach. He wanted more people in leadership that were females. That's up 30% in the last decade or so. He wanted more visibility for female athletes as well. So one of the things that they instituted might seem, natural to see it now, but to have flag bearers that are both men and female. 91% of the nations that marched in the opening ceremonies had a male and a female flag bearer. So it's small things like that where when you put people in leadership positions, they make decisions that kind of make things more equal and neutral and bringing a different perspective. So Thomas Bach should get credit for instituting that over the last decade or so.
And Mike, with everything, when it's something worth achieving, there are always small steps forward, and there are also controversy that comes with it sometimes. There were questions, for example, about the Algerian boxer just a few days ago, Imani Khalif, and her gender eligibility. She is a woman, so in this case, it's a moot point. But to what extent is reaching true gender parity going to include having to deal with questions about transgender athletes down the road? And do you think the IOC has a role to play there?
The IOC has a role to play in it, the NCAA here in the United States, high school sports. So there's a lot of entities where this comes into play. You see a lot of stories that are coming out in terms of, on a smaller scale, whether it be a state champion in a particular sport that may be transgender, certainly the NCAA, there were some swimming competitions and things that are more physical feats where you're kind of seeing these controversies come up. It is something that the IOC and the Olympic movement itself is going to have to, grapple with, obviously with the Iranian boxer front and center, even though that's not that exact issue. But the more that we push for this, the more politicized some of these issues can become. But if the IOC tries to be a leader in this, they could frame the conversation in a very positive way, depending on how you're looking at it.
Yeah, that's a great point. What are some of the other challenges and barriers you think that need to be overcome?
Well, when it comes to, your reporter mentioned it earlier, payment for winning gold medals, that's certainly something that there's a huge disparity nation to nation and certainly in event to event. Some of that is just part and parcel to the sponsorships that certain federations have, that certain events have, certain disciplines. You're going to have more sponsorships, say, when it comes to track and field or swimming than it comes to women's field hockey. It just kind of, it makes sense. But the other thing is, and the IOC is trying to impart this in other nations, the U.S. Olympic Committee with their training facilities in Colorado Springs and other parts of the country, is to have facilities that are also equal for men and for women. Sometimes they'll share those facilities. So it's small things like that. But again, the IOC is struggling with this. The World Cup struggles with this. Certainly when you look at Grand Slam tennis, there's a disparity when it comes to winning Wimbledon for a man versus a female. Same thing with the US Open and other things like that. So it kind of comes down to the dollars and cents sometimes, but they are trying to make those efforts. And I think when you kind of institute those things and try to have equal facilities, equal coaching, putting the same sorts of budgets in, I think that's where you'll kind of see this equity come in, and certainly that's been happening over the last decade or two.
And Mike, what are the long-term goals and benefits of gender parity in your opinion, and how can fans, businesses, and sports clubs help with that?
Well, I think the real challenge is going to be moving forward. So now you kind of see that they're at 50-50. So they've made great efforts to get to this point. So will those efforts continue? That will be the question. But you see it when it comes to the recent uptick in interest in women's basketball from the college level now to the WNBA. While they are getting $2 billion worth of TV revenue, they want more. They feel like they're entitled to more. So while there are certain steps forward that they're making, some certain leaps that are being made, I think you have to follow the money sometimes. And I think that's where a lot of these discussions are gonna come around. We've made a lot of efforts in terms of getting to that 50-50 point. How much money is going to be put into this moving forward? How front of mind will it be moving forward? If you just look at the ratings and you look at the ratings for the WNBA, let's say, for some of the women's sports here in the Olympics, not quite record ratings for NBC, but certainly higher than what they had for previous Olympics. It's all trending in the right way for women's sports.
Absolutely. Women's soccer as well, such a big deal, and so much interest from advertisers as well. Fascinating discussion. Mike Bako, thank you so much for your time.
Always a pleasure.